The year was 2018, May 2018. The flight was scheduled to depart from Chongqing Jiangbei International Airport to Lhasa Gonga Airport, a place that is surrounded by the Himalayan mountains. Lhasa is one of the most challenging airports to land in. It is surrounded by terrain and could pose a serious threat if weather conditions are not favorable. The aircraft that was in use was the state-of-the-art Airbus A319-100 that can seat between 110 to 160 passengers depending on the airline's configuration. The aircraft has clocked about 20,000 flight hours prior to this incident. The Airbus A319 is part of the A320 family. It is slightly shorter, kind of like the little sister of the Airbus A320. On the 14th of May 2018, Flight 8633 took off from Chongqing Airport at 20:25 UTC. About 60 minutes after departure, while over Xiaojin County, the aircraft was at 32,100 feet. At this point, it was flying overhead the Tibetan Plateau. What is a plateau? It is an area of fairly level high ground, a series of mountains kind of like the Himalayan plateau that stretches 2,500 kilometers across Tibet, western half of Sichuan, Southern Gansu provinces in western China, southern Xinjiang, Bhutan, as well as some part of the Indian region, Pakistan, Nepal, eastern Tajikistan, and southern Kyrgyzstan. In short, that is a lot of high mountains. The highest peak is 7,162 meters high, roughly about 23,000 feet high. For a flight like this, additional oxygen bottles are required. Even the aircraft has this high altitude push button to prevent oxygen mask from dropping down prematurely. The passengers are resting and oblivious as to what is about to happen. Little that they know that all 119 lives will soon rest in the hands of one man. The captain was a former Air Force pilot and instructor in the People's Liberation Army Air Force. After serving as an instructor for 10 years, he left the Air Force to join Sichuan Airlines. The first officer was a 27-year-old man with 5 years of flying experience, and they are also accompanied by another relief captain that has 10 years of flying experience. The plan was this: when the plane is about to land in Lhasa, the relief captain will perform the landing. This is because the airport has a high elevation, about 3,500 meters, and special procedures are required. When the plane lands at a high elevation airport, engine performance will be reduced and the landing distance required will increase. Also, Lhasa is surrounded by treacherous mountains and special training and checking is needed for the pilots. At the back, there are 5 cabin crews to assist the passengers. 6 minutes after reaching flight level 321, the aircraft started flying overhead the Tibetan Plateau. Some mountains are as high as 20,000 feet in that area. About 40 minutes into the flight, the pilots heard a loud thud. The windshield on the first officer's side has visible cracks. An ECAM anti-ice right windshield alert came out. Remember this tiny detail as this will be super important later on. The captain calls out for the QRH where there is a windshield crack checklist. As they were going through the checklist, the cracks became more prominent and more cracks started to emerge. The pilots ran through his finger across the cracks to see if the cracks are on the inside. You need to determine whether it's an external or internal crack. To their horror, the cracks are on the inside, the inner window pane. This means the window's integrity is compromised. Apparently, the window has not been honest or truthful. The window of the Airbus A319 has 3 layers of glass. The right thing to do when a pilot encounters this is to initiate a diversion and perform a precautionary landing. Captain, who is the pilot flying, contacted Chengdu Control and requested descent to a lower altitude. The pilots were cleared to descend to flight level 280, 28,000 feet. They informed ATC that their window has no integrity and is lying to them. Jokes aside, they decided to divert to Chengdu Airport, which is the closest airport given their location. However, it is too late.
谢谢。现在有点故障，我准备下高度。38633下8400。下8400，我要返航了，我现在风挡裂了。啊，风挡裂了是吧？哎，对的。 38633这次是返航重庆吗？返航成都。
As they were descending, their worst fears came true. The windshield exploded, and the first officer was pushed out. Why does this happen? We need to understand that when the aircraft is flying at a high altitude, the surrounding air becomes less dense. It is very difficult for a human to breathe. If you have tried climbing a rather high mountain, the ability to breathe properly is reduced because there is less pressure in the air. So, in order for the passengers and crew to be safe from hypoxia, which is the lack of oxygen in the body, modern aircrafts are equipped with a pressurization system. At high cruising altitude, the aircraft is pressurized up to 8,000 feet cabin altitude. This means that the pressure in the cabin is much higher than the pressure outside. When the windshield exploded, it is equivalent to a balloon having its air sucked out. This was bad news for the co-pilot. The seat harness is a 5-point harness system. The first officer was not wearing his shoulder harness. Lucky for him, he was still partially strapped at the waist and groin area. So half of his body was immediately sucked out, kind of like what happened to the passenger of Southwest Airlines Flight 1380. Do check out this video for the full story. Immediately it became foggy in the cockpit. The aircraft was traveling faster than Lewis Hamilton, and the wind and sound must have been crazy. A bunch of warning messages came out on the ECAM, which is a flight display to display all the emergency messages. The door of the cockpit was slammed open. The airbags have two holes at the top of the overhead panel. When there is depressurization, the door will automatically open. Back at the cabin, it was chaotic. Passengers were screaming and trying to grab their masks in order to have oxygen in their lungs. The aircraft is diving straight down to the mountains, and the first officer is getting his face abused with the wind punishing his upper body. Now, the reason why the aircraft started to dive down was because the first officer's leg was pushing the side stick down and to the right. Air traffic control was curious as to why the aircraft was descending so rapidly. He tried calling them but received no answer.
备降成都是吧？对，38633收到了，你先下巴清4保持。48633成都，48633成都架。
The captain took over controls like a champion and did the first thing when encountering any emergency, and that is fly the plane. The captain turned left and brought the aircraft level. But there is a problem. The captain and first officer is now deprived of precious oxygen. When hypoxia sets in, which is the lack of oxygen to the body tissue and the brain, the thinking ability starts deteriorating. The oxygen mask is stored at the left compartment. The captain is unable to reach for the oxygen mask because he was using his left hand to fly the plane. The time of useful consciousness at 30,000 feet is roughly 40 seconds for a normal human. The captain is faced with so many problems. The first officer is partially sucked out. The aeroplane has multiple ECAM warnings, and the whole aircraft is being depressurized rapidly. They are also surrounded by mountains. The captain then makes a sharp left and pushed the aircraft down in order to get to a lower altitude and set course for Chengdu, the land of the giant pandas. All this while, the first officer tried getting back into the aircraft, and 61 seconds later, the pressure inside the plane and outside equalizes. Once this happened, the first officer is able to bring himself back into the cockpit. Now they are faced with another problem. Now that the pressure is equalized, extreme cold air came rushing in. The surrounding air is at minus 40 degrees Celsius. The strong winds and cold temperatures make it super hard for the first officer to reach his oxygen mask. He was also partially injured. Once he managed to don his oxygen mask, the captain ordered him to set the emergency code on the transponder, and the code is 7700 for any aircraft emergency. This alerted air traffic control, and they tried contacting the pilots, but they received no answer.
38633成都架，38633成都。
The air traffic control then requested other airlines to contact Sichuan 8633.
现在832，麻烦在频率下叫一下8633，看能不能叫到。好的，四川的8633成都叫你。
In the cabin, the relief captain managed to get out of his seat and reaches for his tablet. When he reaches the cockpit, he was shocked with what he was seeing. He immediately sat down on the jump seat and donned his oxygen mask. He then assisted the captain to navigate out of the terrain. The first officer was injured, and so the relief captain took over his duties. The aircraft then was at 23,400 feet and is slowly turning away from the mountains. The captain now is at risk of hypothermia and he has 60 more miles to fly to the airport. 12 minutes after decompression, the pilots managed to get out of the mountainous terrain. The relief captain declared Mayday and ATC acknowledged the call. ATC then proceeded to clear all other aircrafts and make way for Sichuan 8633. The cabin crew is doing their best to protect the passengers, but they are in the dark as to what is happening. The pilots are unable to hear ATC instructions because of the noise that is coming from the strong winds. At this point, the flight control unit was damaged and the captain was apprehensive to engage the autopilot. The pilots are also faced with another problem. The aircraft has a lot of fuel and will have to land overweight. They would require much more runway to land and the aircraft may be difficult to slow down. The cabin crew at the back prepared the cabin for an emergency landing and ordered the passengers to be at a brace position. Lucky for the pilots, the flaps and landing gear was functioning normally. As the aircraft was approaching the runway, their approach speed was higher than usual. And as they touched down, the reversers was not working. The captain then has to use the brake pedals to stop the heavy aircraft. Finally, the aircraft came to a complete stop and the tires burst due to the braking action on an overweight aircraft. Against tremendous odds, everyone survives. Now, it is time for the authorities to start their investigation, and the thing that we need to understand is that the flight deck windshield is not like your car's windshield. It has 3 layers, 2 thick window panes and 1 thin outer window pane. The windshield is able to withstand heavy loads like bird strikes, hailstones, etc. So, how is it possible that the windshield is able to explode so easily? Investigators then turned to the ACAS generated messages. ACAS stands for Aircraft Communication, Addressing and Reporting System, which transmits short messages between the aircraft and ground stations via airband radio or satellite. What they found out was rather surprising. Just as the windshield cracked, the ECAM anti-ice right windshield came on. They then started checking to see whether this warning has come out in previous flights. In 2009, there were 2 reports of smoke coming out at the bottom of the windshield, and in 2010, pilots also reported the burning smell that was coming out at the bottom of the windshield during a Hubei flight. In all 3 cases, the cause of the overheating was the heating element. But this time, the Sichuan Flight 8633 pilots did not report any smoke or burning smell in the flight deck. They then turned their attention to the terminal wires of the heating element of the windshield. What they found out was shocking. There were signs of moisture buildup around the wires, and this caused the copper wires to be corroded and damaged. When the current passed through the wires, electrical arcing occurred and created extremely high temperatures. But this does not explain how the windshield can explode. After all, the middle ply of the windshield is designed to withstand very heavy loads. They decided to conduct an experiment. They simulate the crack on the inner and middle ply of the windshield, and then they put the windshield in a pressure chamber. What they found out was when the inner and middle pane is cracked, the outer pane is unable to withstand the pressure and will part with the aircraft. At 32,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure inside and outside of the aircraft is approximately 2 tons. The windshield was simply unable to withstand the pressure. But what they did not understand was why the moisture built-up went undetected. They later found out that the left and right window seals was replaced a year ago before the incident. The last window inspection was 32 days before, and there were no signs of moisture build-up on the terminal block. But the problem is that sealed inspection does not mean that the maintenance crew is able to see moisture build-up unless they remove the whole window. Also, there are sensors to detect temperature but no sensors to detect moisture. But it still doesn't explain why there were so many system failures after the windshield exploded. The pilots lost auto brakes, 6 of the 10 spoilers, thrust reversers, etc. It turns out that the systems themselves were disabled but not damaged. They discovered that all the disabled systems were connected to 17 circuit breakers on a panel behind the first officer's seat. What happened was, when the windshield ruptured, the explosive decompression flung the cockpit door open, which slammed the circuit breaker panel. This popped multiple circuit breakers and disabled certain systems. The final report concluded that moisture seeped into the window sills of the aircraft, and because of the humidity, the electrical wires overheated and caused cracking of the windshield. The differential pressure caused further cracking, and finally the window gave way. Faced with multiple things, the co-pilot being south out, rapid decompression, high terrain surroundings and multiple system failures, the captain saved everyone with his quick thinking and amazing flying abilities. Even with oxygen deprivation and sub-zero temperatures, the captain did not suffer from hypoxia or hypothermia, and this is simply incredible. The crew of course received a lot of awards and accolades, and there is a movie made about this incident. The captain received a huge bonus for this, and rightly so. Because of the crew, particularly the captain's excellent decision making and flying skills, everyone on board was safe. Steps will now be taken in order to prevent this incident from happening again. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.